In 2001, another German study caused such outrage that all mention of it was banned in some Islamic countries. A book appeared written by an expert in early Semitic languages. It was so controversial that the author published under a pseudonym and will only speak on condition that his identity remains concealed.
So gesehen ist es unbedingt erforderlich, den Koran neu zu lesen.
In order to understand it correctly, we need a fundamentally new interpretation and reading of the Quran.
Dr. Markus Gross helped to translate the book from its original German into English and is willing openly to express the author's views.
Es wurde schon gesagt, 20%. Ich würde sagen 25%.
About a quarter or a fifth of the Quran contains unintelligible words or words which don't make real sense. That number can be vastly reduced with a knowledge of Syriac to, let's say, 5%.
Syriac, or Syrio-Aramaic, had become one of the dominant languages of Christian liturgy by the 3rd century. Christ spoke Aramaic, and it can still be heard in remote Christian communities like this town of Malula in Syria. But at the time of Muhammad, Syrio-Aramaic was the major written and cultural language of the whole region. Written Arabic was in its infancy.
Wir haben bis zum Koran einige Inschriften.
There are pre-Islamic inscriptions in Arabic, very short texts, but the first real book written in Arabic is the Quran.
But you're saying the Quran is written in 2 languages.
Ja, ich würde sagen, es gibt ja kaum eine Kultursprache.
In many areas in the world, languages mix constantly, all the time.
Denn
to make it understandable to a speaker of English, you have to go back about 1,000 years. Imagine the Anglo-Saxon peasant talking to his master, who was a Norman and spoke a mixed language of French and an Anglo-Saxon. And you could only understand that mixed language with a knowledge of both.
Muslim scholars of the past had the confidence to acknowledge foreign words in the Quran. In the 10th century, Al-Tabari, one of the most respected commentators, identified Hebrew, Latin, Greek, Persian, Abyssinian, and Syriac words. The difference, though, is that Luxembourg is claiming new meanings that have never been suggested before. How can one German professor challenge the collective judgment of more than 1 billion people, and on what basis? What method does he use?
Ich bin natürlich bemüht, zunächst einmal eine arabische Lesung und eine arabische.
Whenever I try to find a solution for an unclear passage, the first step is to try to find an overlooked meaning of an Arabic word which is not used today, but which can be found in old dictionaries, something that the commentators didn't consider. Only if that is not possible, I take into consideration the meaning of the root, of the corresponding root in Syriac, or a possible misreading. Misreading in this case means that undotted text was dotted wrongly. Then there's also the possibility that a Syriac letter was by mistake written within an Arabic text.
Using these methods, Luxembourg examined some of the most obscure passages of the Quran. After Mary has given birth to Jesus, in the Arabic Quran, the archangel says to her, "Be not sad, your Lord has placed a little river beneath you." In Luxembourg's version, "Be not sad, your Lord has made your delivery legitimate." And there are other highly contentious examples. God's command to a skeptic in Arabic, "Look at your food and drink, look at your ass," becomes "Look at your condition and look at your overall state." At the end of the world, the earth steps forward in Arabic. In Syriac, the earth splits open. Plausible to some, but do any of these changes affect the central precepts of Islam? Or is Luxembourg just adding a little poetic color here and there?
Was soziale Gepflogenheiten angeht, wie zum Beispiel...
It's certainly not key precepts like the existence of God or afterlife, which is challenged by my interpretation, but many everyday customs. One example is the veil. The Quranic verse adduced to prove their position talked about humur, which had to be beaten on the pockets. The sentence was a bit obscure. It's usually rendered that it means cover your head and your cleavage. And if you have a look at the chador, the veil in Iran, for example, that's exactly what is covered.
Aramäisch, Gmar, dann verstehe ich ein Gürtel.
But with my Syriac interpretation of the verse, my translation is, put your belt around your hips. And the belt was a sign of chastity, also especially used by monks. So that makes it much more meaningful.
But Luxemburg's interpretation of paradise causes the greatest offense. In the Iranian city of Isfahan, there's a 17th century palace built to represent the gates of heaven. The cool greens of the gardens beyond express the longings of a desert people and are beautifully described in the Quran, along with flowing fountains and the favors of huris, usually understood as wide-eyed virgins. One commentary, but not the Quran, even specifies numbers, 72 for each righteous man. But that doesn't sit well with 7 verses of the Quran that promise the righteous eternal contentment with their wives. Luxemburg believes he has resolved this contradiction.
Mit weiß großäugigen Huris verheiraten.
There is one passage in the Quran dealing with the Huris, in which it says, وَزَوَجْنَاهُمْ بِحُورَ عِينٍ. We have paired them with dark, wide-eyed maidens. That is the traditional understanding of this verse. If you put the dots on the undotted text a little bit differently, what comes out is, we will make you comfortable under white, crystal-clear grapes.
For the suicide bomber, then, not the prospect of 72 virgins in paradise, but in Luxemburg's interpretation, a modest bunch of grapes. It is the connection Luxemburg makes with Christian symbolism that is highly inflammatory to many, but a persuasive argument to others. This 5th century fresco in an Egyptian monastery depicts the archangels receiving souls in paradise. Each archangel holds a grape in one hand, and in the other cradles the departed souls, who are refreshed with bunches of grapes. The grape motif is repeated in the vestments of the priests of the Syrian Orthodox Church, all relating back to Christ's promise to his disciples at the Last Supper that he will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until he is reunited with them in his Father's kingdom. Although Luxemburg's work has been called into question by leading academics and is controversial by its very nature, he believes it opens a door, encouraging linguists, archaeologists and historians to use modern tools to throw further light on the text and its context.